Not everybody apparently does well living in a free society, and that's apparently an important part of the picture of how a fascist force arises. This is an idea that felt new to me that not too long ago, making a video here about the rise of fascism. Uh, but it's one that I probably should have had in my mind because there is a book that came out in 1941 that I read back in the 1960s called Escape from Freedom by Erich Fromm, who talked about freedom being burdensome and stressful for a lot of people, as he had witnessed the rise of fascism in Germany in the 1920s and 30s. He thought that the people were not comfortable having the range of possibilities that a free society provided. I don't remember much from that book in detail, so I don't know how much of what comes out of me now as I want to explore a little bit more about what it takes, what we should be asking ourselves now. How is the America of recent decades failing to fulfill what a lot of Americans need? Because there wouldn't be this fascistic force being supported by tens of millions of Americans if the free society that we've had was fulfilling them. There's got to be some real source of discomfort about the free society that is leading so many people to gravitate toward a leader who offers to give us a different kind of society. One described the word I like to use, not to get too wound up into definitions, but fascistic, I think, is a term that can embrace a whole lot of the things that Trump and the Republican Party are have been doing and are presenting and are threatening the nation with to overturn our institutions, the constitutional order that makes us a free society. So what is it that would make a person uncomfortable, unfulfilled, whatever the words should be, threatened by the circumstances that we've had in America, and that would make it more appealing to envision an America in which what? Well, in which a lot of things happen, in which we've got a leader who is not governed by the rules of the free society, in which the principle that all men are created equal is rejected in favor of stealing rights from some and giving them to the them and having them for the us, and a whole list of things you could say that are being represented by the Republican Party, the Trump Party of this time. a position of enmity toward all kinds of groups, enmity against the Mexican rapists, and enmity toward a race that uh, has been oppressed in American history and that they seek to disenfranchise now. Oh, we can see these patterns. So we know that antagonism is very important, that the enforcement of a single way is very important, that the refusal to be contained by norms and laws and rules and constitution is an important thing. And there's this element of cruelty that always plays in around the edges of the stage, and sometimes it's center stage. Well, I think that we can see that what a free society requires of people is that they come up with a lot of important things on their own. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of all these things that are there in the constitutional system from the Bill of Rights that was an important part of the ratification process. You get to, in the free society, you get to find your own truth. You get to make up your mind about your political actions, role. You get to find meaning in life on your own terms as best you can find it. And you are entitled to the life task of the pursuit of happiness, which means that you're living for yourself and not for something bigger than you. You have the right to find your own path in life. Well, that is not always something that people are equipped to do. We can see in a book called For Your Own Good by Alice Miller about the child rearing methods of the culture that produced a lot of good Nazis. That there are certain kinds of family structure that produce brokenness of sorts in the children. And it proves to be a kind of brokenness that makes people drawn toward an order in which fascist kinds of things are the case. There was a tyranny in the family structure, and it made people feel disabled from being free, escape from freedom, and drawn toward being in a situation where truth is provided, where the path, where everything that isn't prohibited is mandatory. In other words, you are told what to do. So, one of the contributors to fascism and its rise in the world is people who get brought up in a way where, for example, the way to one's authentic self is somewhat blocked by having had to internalize something harsh about the shoulds, the the punitive, the overly strict, the antagonism toward human needs that can be conveyed in a certain kind of family makes it impossible for the person to adequately embrace a self that's going to get realized by the utilization of the opportunities for thriving offered by a free society. In a free society, one can strive for the optimal identity of being the best that one can be. Something that comes from within in interaction with the world, one's authentic best self. But if there's a self that's so divided by the internalization of harsh morality or of the internalization of not even necessarily a morality, but a power that is to be feared and must be obeyed in order to prevent injury. People grow up with that kind of thing. And it is an impediment to the development of the kind of identity that is what a free society allows, which is the fulfillment of what a person is born to be. In all of our individuality and differences, we are all, different, but fascists like to put people in uniforms. Fascists like everybody goose-stepping down the street in formation. Individuality is something that you have to, that you need to be kind of whole to be able to develop. And there are a lot of people who don't emerge into adulthood with an avenue into that core of self from which a true, organic, authentic identity would grow. I don't know what we do. It's a long-term thing. And I think it has always been a part of America to have a fair amount of that out there. From what I gather, there is I'd like to know exactly what the right number would be, but I think a significant number of American families over the many generations have been, in some fundamental ways, abusive. Not only abusive, but far from ideal in terms of meeting human needs and nurturing the individual selfhood, particularly on the more conservative sides of America, where there is more constraint, for better and for worse, than on the liberal side, where there is more rein given and sometimes not enough good order imposed. One of the ways in which liberalism contributes brokenness to the world is it does not enforce sometimes enough of what's good. But on the conservative side, there is this structure which can readily be abused. And when it's abused, it produces a brokenness en masse as a fascistic movement. So that's going to be a long-term process. It's got to do with the growth of American civilization into a more and more whole thing, which is not guaranteed to be our future, but which is the kind of future we need, in which each generation, the families are more whole and more able to equip the young people that are growing up in those families uh, to be in reasonable peace with who they are, enough to be able to do take on the lifetime task of making the most of the opportunities a free society gives them to find fulfillment in being the most fulfilling and best version of themselves they can be. When I was discovered this way of looking at things the other day, whether it's my insight or Eric Fromm's or um, some combination, I don't know. But when I saw this, I also saw that there was a second side um, to what can break down here about the support for a free society. And it's got to do with the fact that a free society in itself evolves. And since people do have I think, an inborn yearning for a level of meaningfulness and a kind of some spiritual contact, that there is a job to be done by the free society too. I mean, one of the other things about fascism, I mean, you can see it if you look at the film Triumph of the Will, put together for the Nazis as a form of propaganda, with a great, brilliant propagandist movie maker, a woman named Lena Riefenstahl, something like that. Anyway, you can see in the square in Nuremberg with the flags and the torches and the marches and the throngs and the Sieg Heils and the excitement in the faces of the people as they were forming something so spiritually meaningful to them that they were ecstatic practically. So fascism does provide some kind of meaning. And so the people who go, for example, to Trump rallies are getting something that I think human beings in general need, having to do with meaning and the spiritual and purpose. It's all twisted. It's all based on lies, and it's always infused with something which is destructive in its impact. But still, there's a human need there that gets met by these Aryan youths. You can see it in a very telling scene in the movie Cabaret, where a group of like Bavarian country folk are at a beer garden and full of community feeling and good cheer, and they look wonderful, and they look like humanity at its best. And a sweet song begins that fits in with this idyllic view of things, but then it gradually changes into a Nazi anthem, and a crowd of people who had looked so friendly and gemütlich are all of a sudden full of a rage. It's going to inflict a nightmare on the world. You can see that there's, that the level of the need for something to feel passionate and spiritually connected with is being met, even though it's in an utterly destructive form. But if people need that, then if a free society is going to prosper, the free society's got to meet that need too. And it's not inconsistent with the free society's notion that we're all entitled to our own religious beliefs. There are ways we can speak about what is sacred about the free society as an environment where good things happen, where human life is allowed to achieve what it should achieve, where there is well-being and fulfillment and life is thriving. That's what we should aspire to, and that is where we experience things as being sacred, and there is a truth that can be delivered about what the free society represents and what it provides that is consistent with religious, spiritual insight in general. Things like truth and justice and love and well-being, and one can compose a completely meaningful credo for the free society that does not trample on anybody's rights, and that gives people a basis for forming the positive equivalent of a fascist rally, that we will rally to defend a free society from the spirit of fascism, because this constitutional order delivers us so many blessings to allow human life to take the forms that it should take. I don't think America has been doing that job very well as the generations have gone by. I've experienced America in how many different decades? The 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, the aughts, the 20s, and now into another generation. And over the years, I've tried to tune in on, what the message is from the culture. I have also been a consumer all my life of American culture of before my time, and a lot through the movies that were made about earlier times, but especially also in earlier times, in my parents' generation. I know the world that the movies presented then. And I have the feeling that American civilization as a cultural set of values and visions has become spiritually hollowed out over time. I think there have been aspects of progress, but overall, I think that the pieties that survived well into the 20th century about liberty and justice for all and all that stuff, I think have thinned out. They're in the public consciousness. I think they're just a wisp of what they once were. We don't have civics education in the schools. Not that that was ever so great, but perhaps it was in some places great, and it certainly was no reason why it couldn't be great, because American society has stood for a lot of good things. The case can be made that this Constitution that we've got is a device our founders gave us to protect us against the historical nightmares that afflicted most of the history of civilization up until they made this beautiful step forward into a free society. One of the things which I think has weakened our society is, besides the stilling of the voice, maybe we've come to take things for granted because we've had them so long. But I think it's more than that. I think that there's just Mammon teaches so much of what there is getting taught in America in our collective space. The dollar runs so much of what our society is. And the dollar buys advertising that is a profoundly powerful teacher, where the voices of powers that have things to buy and sell are continually teaching us a view of what's of value that serves to enrich that system. But it is not the path that our religious traditions and our deep moral traditions have taught us is the path to fulfillment. I mean, a lot of good things can happen with what you can buy and sell. Don't get me wrong. But the core task in human life involves other values of a spiritual nature. But we lose touch with those values if we're getting bombarded by messages that if you want to pursue happiness, buy this. Yeah. We need to offer as many Americans as possible a sense of meaning and mission and value in which contacts them in their core and provides them a message that enlists their passions to defend a free society. In the next year, or less than a year, there is going to be a battle waged that should be understood as the battle between democracy and fascism. And it will have many different places where the forces are engaged. There will be Donald Trump's trials. There will be Donald Trump's communications to his base and to the American people in general to rally them to the kind of presidency he seems to be clearly offering. There will be what the defenders of democracy communicate to the American people about what's at stake and why they should care. I think that the core of the job can be conceived right now as offering the American people in the most powerful, effective, persuasive way possible, choosing between when they choose between Trump and Biden and the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, that both of them, all those choices boil down to a choice between a fascistically governed society or a free society. And for that choice to be presented in a way which is compelling, so that people cannot stop seeing that is indeed the heart of the matter right now, and that is presented with such a sense of what the meaning and value and sacredness that are at stake in that battle, that people are roused to form part of the democratic majority of Americans that don't want fascism. I truly do believe that a very substantial majority of Americans if they experience the actual choice, will choose democracy. I have little doubt about that. I don't think those who would not number maybe not even as much as a third of Americans. So that's the magnitude of the victory that I would like for the side of democracy to strive for in this election. The more thoroughly it can be defeated, the more quickly we can be done with this imbalance that we've reached between the forces of democracy and those that would turn us into a authoritarian autocracy, dictatorship, fascist regime, whatever you want to call it. We've reached a moment of crisis in that respect. This is the task of the moment. And the task is to awaken that 2/3 of the American people who would say no to fascism if they understood the choice. That's what the election of 2024 is about. I hope that the forces of democracy can rise powerfully to the occasion. Thank you.